Lucy Parsons. Welcome to today's show. Today I've got a really special guest, Jen Gale, who is a sustainability expert, and she works with people to help them live more sustainable lives. But she calls the work that she does sustainable-ish because she knows how difficult it is in the society that we live in to live a perfectly sustainable life, but recognises the small changes that we can make, which cumulatively, when we all make them in society, will add up to making a big difference to our climate and our planet. So sustainability is something that is very close to my heart. You may know that I studied to be a geography degree, and I was a geography teacher, and I was studying all this stuff before it was really trendy and fashionable. I can remember learning about coral bleaching in my degree and how climate change and the warming of the oceans was actually causing the destruction of coral, and we did lots of other stuff about how the climate had changed over the years and what that meant for the world, basically. So with COP26, which is happening the week I'm publishing this, I thought it was relevant to publish something about how to study more sustainably. So Jen has come on the podcast to share with us some really actionable tips, some of which you will be able to take, some of which will be harder for you to take, but it just depends on the lifestyle that you lead. But I'd just love to encourage you to listen to this with an open mind and think about which of the things that Jen talks about today you could implement to make your studying or your child's studying more sustainable. Okay, let's go straight over to the interview with Jen. Welcome to the School Success Formula, Jen Gale.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. So just before we get started on some sustainable-ish studying tips, can you tell everybody who you are and, you know, why you're a good person to listen to?
I'm not sure the answer to either of those. I'm a mum to two boys who are very nearly 13 and 10. And I run, I say I run Sustainable-ish. That makes it sound like it's this really big organisation. It's just me. But I'm I guess, sustainability coach and mentor and author and speaker. And I talk about this idea of sustainable-ish. So the idea of the sort of imperfections and the compromises and the messy various shades of green that we can all be, and the idea that we can all make a difference without having to kind of subscribe or aspire to some of those green stereotypes maybe that exist around, what does Boris talk about, mung bean eating, bunny hugging, whatever, but actually we can all make a difference without needing or wanting to go to those extremes.
Amazing. Okay, so you're going to share with us some sustainable-ish studying tips today. And I think one of the best places to start is with stationery. So
yes, who doesn't love a bit of stationery?
Sustainable stationery.
So I think the easiest swap to make is to, and certainly I talk about this in terms of for little ones and things, colouring pencils instead of colouring pens, because obviously they're wood, unless you get those weird, have your kids ever brought home those like plastic pencils? I'm like, who thought this was a good idea? And then you're sharpening them and shaving off little bits of plastic. Pencils, but obviously, if you're doing a piece of written work or whatever, a pencil isn't going to sort of be okay. But actually, we bought my eldest, when he started secondary school, a fountain pen, a proper refillable, with a pot of ink, and it's got these sort of they're like reusable cartridges in it, so you can sort of pull the ink up into it and use those. So they're great because that's, you're not throwing away a whole pen each time.
I've got one of those. I absolutely love it.
I know. And actually my youngest, because I had one as well, and my youngest has started he wants one, and we've said when you get to secondary school, but when he uses mine, his writing is so much neater because I think he has to take a bit more time sort of doing it. So that's quite a good one. You can get highlighter pencils now instead of highlighter pens.
Wow.
So that can be quite a good, God, I remember when I was revising, just going through, highlighter after highlighter. So that's a really good one, trying to find some highlighter pencils. And obviously, like when you're using paper, if you can print double-sided, if your printer has that capacity, then do that. If it doesn't, then I always save anything that we've printed single-sided and use the back of that for scrap paper, and then obviously recycling afterwards.
Yeah, I when I was revising, I used to like test myself a lot, and so I just scrawl like answers to testing myself on the and you could use the other side of already printed paper, waste paper for that, and that would be really good use of it, I think.
And making sure you recycle your paper, but also if you're looking for printer paper and or notebooks or anything like that, looking to try and find the 100% recycled, and look for what they call, I think it's like post-consumer waste or something. So that's what we imagine recycled paper to be. That it's like other paper that's been smooshed up and made into paper, because obviously then you're not having to chop down trees. And it's great if it's there's a forestry standard commission, isn't there, FSC, that means they're sort of managed forests and things, but it's so much better to try and use a recycled paper if you can. And then if you're printing, this is a stat I found in one of the books, changing the font you use can massively reduce the amount of ink that you use. So changing from, I'm trying to remember this correctly, changing from Arial to Century Gothic uses a third less ink.
Wow.
Who knew that?
It's amazing, isn't it? The things that you just don't think about that can make a difference. Very marginal differences, but they are differences, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think the other big thing to say about stationery is, like, we probably all remember that lure and the excitement and it sort of signals the start of a new academic year, going and buying your new stationery, but there's probably not a lot wrong with the old stationery. So trying to, make do with what you've got, and actually if it's still doing the job, then it's not as exciting. But if you can make do with the same stuff you've had the year before, then that's all the better.
Yeah, brilliant. And the other thing that if you have got pens, my local primary school is a pen recycling point for TerraCycle. So you can go on the TerraCycle website, can't you, and find out where your local pen recycling point is. And if you haven't got one, you can actually sign up to be one.
That's right. Yeah. And I think most Ryman's stores are part of that. So if you've got a Ryman's near you, you can go in and drop your pens off there. And I signed our primary school up for it, but it's quite a volume that you need. I mean, it seems a no-brainer for primary schools because they must be getting through so many pens, and because I think you can put in board, whiteboard pens and all that sort of thing as well. But it is quite a volume that you need to send off. So maybe if you're a smaller school, you might want to pair up with, sort of team up with a few other schools so that you can sort of meet the weights and that kind of thing. But yeah, and then if you have a little pen recycling box in every classroom, or if you have a little box at home where you remember just to put all the used pens, and then you can, next time you're going into town or whatever, you can drop them off.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so that's sustainable-ish stationery. So basically find recycle paper if you can, use pencils rather than pens where you can, and recycle what you can't, and don't buy new until you've run out of the old.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So what about school uniform, which I know is the bane of many parents' lives? Is there anything that people can do there?
I mean, it's, as you said, it's the bane of, and I think especially when you get to secondary school, it feels that bit more difficult. I know at the primary school my kids were at, there was a really great secondhand uniform service that the PTA ran, but that doesn't seem to exist as commonly, I don't think, in secondary schools, in my experience. But there will often be WhatsApp groups or a school community Facebook group or whatever, and I think uniform will often sort of circulate on there, and obviously asking friends or family if they've got older kids, if they're happy to pass you on some things, because buying secondhand is going to, it's going to be cheaper, massively cheaper, and B, it's saving all those resources, and especially when kids are growing so quickly, you don't want to spend however much on a blazer when they're going to, they might have grown out of it in 6 months. So definitely looking for it secondhand. It's really hard to find, because often, and I think again, especially with secondary schools, they're a bit more prescriptive about the stuff that you need to have, and there seems to be more branded stuff, especially for PE kit and things like that. So often kind of your hands are a bit tied. But if you're looking for the basics like trousers and skirts and socks and things like that, then looking for places like M&S will do the sort of what they call Better Cotton initiative. If you can afford it, the sort of organic cotton is always going to be a better option. And again, I think be realistic about how many items of which you're going to need. Like how often can you put a wash on? How quickly can you get it dry? I'm a big fan of just sort of sponging the mud off the knees of the school trousers, and they can wear them again the next day. And just trying to get away with the bare minimum, I guess, that you can, that fits in with your lifestyle and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And with school shoes, there's shoe recycling schemes, aren't there?
Yeah, so there's a great one called Sal's Shoes, SAL''S shoes, and I think what they do is they collect them and they take them out to developing nations where kids often won't have shoes, or maybe they need shoes to go to school, and if they don't have them they can't go, and all that kind of thing. So so you'd need to go on the website to check the sort of exactly what they'll take and what they won't take, but I think they will take things like football boots and trainers and things like that as well. So that's always a really good option. I think some Clark's stores, I think they have bins in them, don't they, to for recycling shoes. But if they've got some life left in them, then see if you can pass them on to friends or family, and if they're still in really good nick, whack them on eBay or something like that, because people are always looking to save some money on, because school shoes are so expensive, aren't they?
They are really expensive. Yeah, my daughter's feet are now the same size as my feet.
So then you have to because my sons were, I think they are still the same size as me, so I'm like buying him wellies that I know that I will then want to wear after he's had them. Do you know what I mean? You can kind of be very tactical about your buying.
Yeah, good idea. Brilliant. Okay, what about what students can do to make kind of sustainable change happen?
Yeah, so I think it's really easy, whether we're students, whether we're parents, whether we're neither of the above, to feel really powerless when you come to something as big as the climate crisis. But actually, we all have much more power than we think we do. So we've got a huge amount of power as consumers, and I know that mine are just, like I said, my eldest is just about to hit those sort of teenage years, and as a parent, I imagine it's going to become quite difficult. Am I allowed to sort of my consumer values and ethics and stuff, how much of that can I impose on him? But always remembering that however old we are, that we have a choice over what we buy. That I think there probably is a huge amount of peer pressure at school around the clothes you buy and the phones you get and all those kinds of things. But remembering about upgrades, like we don't have to upgrade just because Apple tells us we have to upgrade, all that kind of thing. But also remembering that we've got a voice, and especially as a within a something like a school is a ready-made community. We've got a voice within that community. We can be an influencer within that community, but also within our community of friends, and that can feel a little bit uncomfortable, well, probably a lot uncomfortable when you're going through the whole teenage years, to be the one going, actually, I don't really want to come to Primark with you this afternoon. I'd rather go and have a mooch around the charity shops, or that can be really difficult. But sometimes being the one brave enough to kind of say that, you might find everyone else going, oh God, you know what, I've been really worrying about or I've sort of heard about fast fashion and I'd like to explore some other things. But in terms of I talk about this idea of being like a change agent within any organization that you're involved with. So schools are brilliant for that, because as a student or as a parent, you can be asking those questions like, oh gosh, why don't why haven't we got any paper recycling bins in the classroom? That feels like a really nice, easy thing that we could do. Or, does anybody know what happens to our food waste from the canteen? Or, is there any chance we could have meat-free Monday? And I think especially coming from students as well, that's, schools are there to provide you with an education, but also to ideally for you to come out as kind of, well-rounded,
Yeah.
citizens who are able to express themselves and all that kind of thing. And so, I think there's a great capacity there to be able to influence your peers, but also to influence the wider school community, and to maybe, especially when schools have been through so much upheaval over the last 18 months with COVID and things, that a lot of this stuff has slipped off the agenda. And actually for students now to be saying, oh, hold on, guys, I remember we were doing quite well a couple of years ago. How, can we restart that eco club, or can we restart that green club, or that kind of thing? Or maybe if there's a few of you and you haven't got an eco club you want to start. And there's loads and loads of resources, and I can send you a load of links, Lucy, if you want to put them in the show notes. There's the Eco Schools Framework. There's a great organisation called Transform Our World, and actually there's a great young man who I messaged on Twitter last night, called Joe Brindle, and he lives not far from me. But he started a campaign called Teach the Future, around the idea that, we have an obligation to be teaching our students and our young people about the world that they're going to enter, and embedding all this into the curriculum and things. And he did this when he was like 17 or something, and he's now gone on to uni, and but there's this whole organization and this sort of almost legacy that he's created. And yeah, I just think, we have so much more power than we think we do, and it's very easy to feel powerless. But sometimes just start by asking some questions can be a really nice, gentle place to start.
Yeah, definitely. And I know some of the students that I've had the pleasure to work with one-to-one over the years have been very much involved in this kind of thing. It's just wonderful to see, because I studied geography at university over 20 years ago now, and we were all talking about this then. And it's just so wonderful to see young people actually taking on the responsibility in a way previous generations haven't.
But on the same token, it shouldn't all be on their heads. And our generation absolutely need to be stepping up to help them. So I think, if there are parents listening, if there are any staff listening, we can make it so much easier for our young people to take these steps by almost sort of giving them permission to ask these questions, saying, oh guys, where do you think we could make a difference with our sustainability and that kind of thing. And in an ideal world, a school would have this sort of sustainability ethos embedded throughout the whole school. It would be the catering, it would be the management of the grounds, it would be the in the curriculum as well, because it's geography, it's science, but it's so much more as well. And I really feel like we have an obligation to be incorporating this, and I think schools are such a brilliant place to start, because not only are you is it sort of influencing the students, but also their parents, the wider community. And schools, as a bottom line, they're a business, and they've got a lot of suppliers and things that they can be influencing and things. So that I just think they're in such a key role, really. And sometimes you just need a handful of students, or an engaged member of staff, or a couple of parents nagging in order to make change happen.
Yeah, it's just so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about travel to school? I know you're talking about this on social media quite a lot.
Yeah, I think travel's a big part of our our individual carbon footprint and our carbon footprint as a kind of nation, and we are a very car dependent nation, aren't we? A lot of it will depend on where you live and where your school is situated, what the public transport is like. If you're in a big city, it's probably a bit of a no-brainer to get public transport, especially if you're in somewhere like London, where the public transport is relatively cheap and very accessible. We live a bit more rurally, so but there are a lot of I think if you have a school bus service, take advantage of it. If you do live close, I mean, there's a stat that says something like 38% of journeys are of car journeys are under 2 miles or something.
Mm.
I think we could probably all walk or cycle 2 miles. And I don't know if things have changed. Certainly when I was at secondary school, everybody walked or biked. There might have been a few buses coming in from sort of outlying villages. But I don't really remember a lot of people being driven to school, but I imagine that might have changed a little bit now.
I think it has changed. From talking to the people in my communities, I think there are people who do drive to school, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But if you can think of other ways, I think it's really helpful, isn't it? I know my mum used to say that I was in a terrible mood until I'd had my walk to school in the
Yeah.
morning, and I was always in a better mood by the time I'd walked to school. And she was happy to let me loose on other people.
And I think walking home as well gives you that almost little downtime, that separation, doesn't it, between your school day and mine just come home and they're straight onto a screen for however long they're allowed, but it gives you that time. And especially like my youngest is still at primary school, so he doesn't mind me walking with him, so we actually get to have a bit of a chat about his day. Whereas it's like 2 minutes in the car and then he's straight out and onto a screen and I get nothing out of him. But remember with all of these things as well, that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's not like you can never drive to school again. Maybe you drive to school when it's raining, or maybe you drive to school when they've got their massive load of sports kit, or if they're finishing late, you'll come and pick them up, or that kind of thing. Or you have an aim that you're going to do 3 days a week where you don't use the car, that kind of thing. So that you just can sort of gradually change these habits and things. Because I think, if kids are used to being driven everywhere, it does suddenly feel like a big ask to go, or they're suddenly like, what, I couldn't possibly do that. But actually once you start doing it, they realize actually it's not as bad, and it's more of a kind of token win. Oh god, do we have to do that? But they just get on and do it.
Yeah, I think the other thing that, if they're used to being driven everywhere, it's setting up a set of expectations for life, isn't it? About this is how life works. And so, if we challenge those expectations, that, life is possible without a car.
Yes.
You don't need to use the car every time you go anywhere. I mean, of course, it depends on where you live, but I think challenging those preconceptions is healthy, isn't it?
And some of it will be like sort of modeling those behaviors yourself as well. So I really frustrates me that my kids don't want to sort of cycle to school. So I make quite a point now, if I've got a short journey, of cycling it, or walking it, and being able to say to them, I walked into town today, or so that again, I think they realize that because it's convenient, it's easy, especially when you've got younger kids as well, to just jump in the car, isn't it? But actually we probably could all walk more, cycle more, but it's trying to find ways that fit that into our already kind of packed schedules and busy lives. But sometimes just challenging yourself to, could we do a couple of days a week car free, and just have a go.
Yeah, have a go, see what works. Okay, the last thing I'd like to ask you about is waste, because in my experience, education does generate quite a lot of waste.
Yeah.
Have you got any ideas about what people can do about that?
I mean, there's the really obvious kind of, recycling, but trying to make it achievable, accessible. So, having a paper recycling bin in every class, next to every printer, next to every photocopier, that's much easier than, having to go and hunt down the two paper recycling bins that exist in the school somewhere. Having a pen recycling box in every class, having really nice, clearly labeled recycling bins. Maybe they're different colours, and actually having the what can go in each bin at eye line rather than on the front of the bin, so you've got to bend down and try and work out what you can put in there. That kind of thing can be really relatively easy and cheaply implemented. Double checking what your I don't know how it works with schools, because they have a council recycling collection most of the time, do they, or waste collection?
So, mostly, I don't know exactly.
Yeah. But double checking that you're doing everything that you can. Maybe you do have some, like I said, the pen things and the crisp packets. God, I can't imagine the number of crisp packets that schools must get through. You could have a crisp packet bin, and all of these, certainly the TerraCycle schemes can be hooked up. So if you've got a PTA, then that's a registered charity, they can be the TerraCycle schemes will generate money for a nominated charity, and that can be your nominated charity. So it can actually be a fundraiser as well.
Wow, yeah.
And then things like food waste from the cafeteria and things like that. That probably involves a bigger discussion with the kind of catering team, but yeah, again, just asking the question, what does happen to our food waste, and is it, some councils will have a food waste collection, and I'm assuming that maybe schools can piggyback onto that. But I know some schools where they've had set up their own sort of mini biodigesters and things like that. So there are lots of schemes that you can do, but also just the I think certainly for primary schools as well, stuff around portion control, like the portions that they end up giving, like the really tiny ones, are huge. And and if you're at secondary school, you're able to sort of help yourself, thinking, am I actually going to be able to eat all of this? And I can always go back for more, hopefully, if I want more. But trying to physically scrape less food into the bin would be really important as well, I think.
One of the most successful things we've done is eliminate cling film from our lives, and just literally using like Tupperware pots, or even leftover like ice cream,
the margarine tubs, and
all that kind of thing. And when the kids were having school dinners, that we just didn't use cling film or any kind of wrapping from home. They just had the pots, and some of them, like the little salad pots that came from the village pub takeaway.
Yes,
disintegrated after a while, but we probably used them 20 or 25 times before they disintegrated. And so that's, plastic has had given more value to humanity before it's no longer useful.
Yes, definitely. It's not trying to have a air quotes plastic free lunchbox. It's thinking trying to have a single-use plastic-free lunchbox. So, and again, that doesn't have to be an overnight switch. You can do that kind of slowly. And I get that there's probably, when my kids were in primary school and having packed lunches, we'd like get a big grab, share bag of crisps and portion some out. Now, I can imagine if you start doing that at secondary school, there's going to be a little bit of Mickey taking or whatever, maybe. So you kind of got to work with your kids and what feels doable for them, kind of peer wise as well. But yeah, it's completely possible to to do it with different Tupperware pots and bits and pieces. I guess it's as kids get a little bit older, whether that's kind of deemed acceptable by them.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with my daughter, but she's just started secondary school, and I was like, do I really need to buy a new bag? And I was like, I shouldn't have to buy a new bag. And I said to her, do you mind if we don't buy you a new bag? You can just use one of the ones that you've got. And she's like, no, that's absolutely fine. And I said, because I remember when I went to secondary school being teased mercilessly about having the wrong kind of bag.
Right, yes.
And I just said to her, if anybody teases you, just say to her, well, it's more environmentally sustainable to keep using this one until it starts. And I think just equipping them with that language to their choices can be a really powerful thing to do as well.
Yeah, and it's weird how kind of peer pressure works, isn't it? Because it can be a really positive thing, and you can, she could be the one who actually makes some of the other kids think about that, or it can obviously work the other way and be a really negative thing. But that's where, if a school really kind of takes this on board and it becomes the whole ethos of the school, it becomes normal for the children to be doing these things and to be thinking about these things and to be making these choices. And so that's where I took this idea that we're almost giving them permission to be seen to be making these different choices that maybe they want to, but they're worried about being picked on and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's like you say, kind of equipping them with that, the confidence, the words to use, the being able to articulate why they've done what they've done.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, this has been great, Jen. I think this has given people loads to work with. But I just really love your ethos that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to make, the small changes that you can manage within the context of your life. I mean, where did that kind of philosophy come from for you?
I think, I mean, we started our sort of air quotes journey doing a year buying nothing new, which is quite, quite extreme, isn't it? But just this, I guess, growing realization that a lot of people are put off even starting because they think, well, if I say I'm going to be a bit more sustainable, a bit more green, someone's going to shout at me because I'm not vegan, or I've still got a car, or, we're doing this and we're doing that. And actually, the sort of peak green that we're told we must aspire to isn't what a lot of people aspire to. And this whole idea, there's this lovely quote by someone who's on social media as the zero waste chef. She talks about, zero waste, and this, she says, we don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly, we need millions of people doing it imperfectly. And I think sometimes it's the getting started that's the hardest part. The fear of change almost is worse than the change itself. So if we can make the barrier to entry as low as possible, then hopefully we can get more people started. And I think once we get started, it develops a bit of momentum of its own, and then you're much more likely to take the next step and the next step. It's a bit like me saying to you, you're going to run a marathon tomorrow, and I'm going to go, no, I'm not. But if they said to me, you're going to run a marathon in 6 months or 9 months time, and I'm going to help you train, and this is the first thing we've got to do is go and find your trainers. Oh yeah, no, I can do that. It's a bit like that, isn't it? And so I just feel like we need to make it as accessible as possible for people, make it as easy as possible for people, and make it as judgment free almost as possible for people.
Yeah, definitely. So you have a range of stuff to support people getting started with this. I mean, I love your free Facebook group, which is a really supportive space. Tell us about what else you do that can get people started on this journey.
So yeah, there's the free Facebook group. That's if you just search Sustainable-ish on Facebook, you should find that, and across all the social media platforms and things. I've got a podcast as well, Sustainable-ish podcast. So if people want to come and listen to that, and we have guests, but also there's little solo ones with me, and all around this idea of imperfect action, and judgment free and that kind of thing. I've written 2 books. So the Sustainable-ish Living Guide came out in January last year, and the Sustainable-ish Guide to Green Parenting, which has got a bit more kind of school stuff. It starts from pre-baby and goes right through to teenagers and secondary school and things. That came out March this year. And the Knackered Mums Eco Club, which
I just love the name.
which is my sort of membership community, but around this idea that I wasn't really seeing a space for, I don't know, people like me and you who sort of maybe want to do our bit, but don't really
can't run our lives.
Yeah. Are juggling all the balls and spinning all the plates, and but still kind of wanting to be doing our bit. And it's just a lovely, safe place for people to come and, cock it up and whinge about the kids, and but still get that sense of collective impact as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jen.
No worries, thank you.
It stimulates people to just make one small change,
yes,
so
definitely.
that we can start that snowball effect and save the world together.
Yes.
To put it grandly.
Yeah. And it all starts with that journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, doesn't it?
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Jen. And I hope it's helped everybody who's listening.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I hope you found the interview with Jen really useful. I'd love to hear what sustainable studying change you're going to make as a result of listening to this. So do come on over to the podcast show notes, which you'll find at Sustainable Studying. Well, it's lifemoreextraordinary.com/sustainable studying. And if you scroll to the bottom of that post, you'll find a place where you can leave a comment and just let us know which of the things that Jen has suggested you're going to try to implement in your studying. or your school life indeed. So I hope you really found that helpful and it's given you some inspiration about one small change that you can make. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.